So, hello, today we're at St Mary the Virgin's Church in Virley in Essex, and we'd like to talk to you about the history of the church and the village itself. So Virley is a village in Essex. It's 2.5 miles from Great Wigborough and 2.4 miles from Tolson Knights. Now, Virley's farmland slopes down to the Salcott Creek and the Blackwater estuary. The elevation is around 6 metres or 19 feet in old money. Today's population is around 74. As we approach this small bridge, we approach Virley and cross over the Salcott Creek. And if we turn around, we face Salcott. Salcott Creek. As we look down from the bridge, we see the Salcott Creek, restricted here, but further down we shall see it carves its way through the Blackwater estuary mud. Salcott and Virley were once great villages in their own right. Today the two have become one and share the name Salcott Virley. Virley's Barrow Henge. We shall now walk from Virley's Mill Lane and head across the cornfields, for in the distance lays Virley's Barrow Henge. So today promises to be a glorious sunny day, 25 degrees and light breeze, no rain. We've had a pretty bad summer, to put it mildly. They said the wettest in 30 years. So this is much needed. Be a nice day. In the distance we can see where we were at the hay bales, about 700 metres away. Now we've all heard of Stonehenge in Salisbury. Well, Virley has its own henge. If we just pan around, now the barrow mound is 2 metres high and 30 metres in diameter, with a 5 metre causeway, making this an island of sorts. Now its original purpose is still a mystery, but likely to have been a ceremonial and meeting place for our Neolithic ancestors some 5,000 years ago. And I guess we're walking across the causeway right now. Now, in recent centuries, this site must have supported a windmill to grind corn, but there's so much we don't know and so much to find out. Virley during the Saxon times. Now, during 1066, Virley was a very small settlement. With only 3 smallholders and 1 slave working this land. Its fane was a free man, but we know no more. Virley during the Norman times. By 1086, Robert de Virley was the first lord here. The village still bears his name 937 years later. Now, isn't that something? The Virley family would live here until 1315, when Philip de Virley would sell the manor to Walter de Pattleson. Now, a gentleman from these parts told me that once this was the area on this side of Virley where there was a salt mill, and brushwood would be used to boil away the water to produce the salt. The bridge is just over here where we started from, and if you see this bungalow here, this was once where the creek would run and the barges, I believe coal barges, would be moored up. Chapel at Virley. Now, during the 13th century, the Virley family would build a chapel here for its villagers, for it seems they had great difficulty crossing the creek to attend Mass in Salcott. I read that Robert de Virley was in fact a feudal baron in the reign of Henry I and would establish Swine Priory in Yorkshire, dedicating it to St Mary the Virgin. Now, by coincidence, the same dedication was given to Virley's chapel right here. St Mary the Virgin Church. At some point, St Mary's would become a church, now a forgotten ruin, but once a magnificent 13th century nave and chancel stood right here. St Mary's is built from Roman brick and tile and Reigate and cairn stone with limestone dressings. It's quite possible that the Roman bricks here came from a great villa which once stood at Toll St Knights. If we look around, we can see some embedded in the wall. Reigate stone. Now, most of the walls contain Reigate stone from Kent, so most likely brought across the Blackwater estuary and offloaded right here at the port at Virley. Cairn stone. If you look closely, you can still find cairn stone brought over from Normandy in France. St Mary's Church was improved during the 14th, 15th and 16th centuries, and then it went into a gradual decline. I'm going to doff my own hat for I think I've just found the old scratch dial, the original compass. And perhaps it's not been used for 500 years. I'll show you how it works. And we can still see the markings. Now, even before the 1884 quake, or the earthquake, which struck here, this old church was in a bit of a state. The last service would be conducted in 1879. Now, today Virley's church is classed as a ruin and is set in the old rectory grounds, which is a private residence. Now, the owner has kindly let me document its setting for this video. Now we stand in the chancel. This would have been the east window. This would have been the south wall. This would be the dividing wall to the nave. And what we're looking at now is one of the key features which just about survives. It's the chancel arch. If we look, we can see the stone. The arch would have gone like so. We can also see a Roman brick and tile, almost 2,000 years of age. Now supporting like a bird's nest. It must be about 6 inches thick. Or shall we say wide? It's over 2 inches thickness. If we look to the east, we can see the site of the original Saxon manor. Now we're on the north side, and I want to have a look at this window here, so we can still see some of the original stone jambs and a bit of the ledge. If we look onto the right side, we can see some of the fluted, if that's the correct word, stonework. If we look above, the ivy has formed its own arch. Now if we look around, we can see one of the buttresses that have been added, I guess either in the Georgian or Victorian period. And I would stick my neck out and say that this crack was caused by the earthquake of 1884. If we look in this window, we've got these holes, and I think they're for window bars. There's another one just in there. If you look inside the chancel, we can still see the original arch brace leaning up against that wall. And I guess it would be made of iron, and it had been made by the local blacksmith. We can still see where he's flattened it off so it go against the stonework. The last thing I want to show you is a peg tile. So if this church was made or built in the 13th century, we don't know how old this is, but you can just make out the hole. Beautiful vistas. So now we're following the Salcott Creek, or Salcott Creek, towards the Black Water. And you can see with every turn there's another lovely view. Now we can see just on the other side of the creek the church of Salcott, which does survive. We can see some, I guess there's sluice gates for the very low land that is here to control the tides and so on, or the running water. I came here looking for Salcott's missing port, for in the 100 Years' War of the 1300s, 5 warships departed close by. Now, in more recent centuries, this was known, I'm guessing here, as Church Wharf. And if you can imagine that huge barges would pass by here, would be moored up here, I guess laden with corn and coal and so on. So here perhaps we stand on the saltings, a type of land that will flood from time to time, but can be used for grazing. Along here we have the seawall, so you can imagine this going under. And I believe this could have been an old dugout, cutout, whatever you want to call it, where the boat of some sort could have been moored, and there's a little exit there. Perhaps this was the location of the port from the 100 Years' War, who knows. But you can see how the creek cuts through. Smuggling in Virley. Virley's proximity to the Blackwater estuary made it an ideal place for smuggling. The Reverend Gould of Mersey Island wrote, "The mouth of the Blackwater was a great centre of the smuggling trade. The numbers of channels made it a safe harbour for contraband traffic. It was easy for those who knew the creeks to elude the revenue bolts. Every farm and tavern was ready to run goods and harbour to smugglers." Now the good Reverend Gould went on to say, the villages of Virley and Salcott were the chief landing places, and their horses and donkeys were kept in large numbers for every conveyance of the spirits, wine, tobacco and silk to Tiptree Heath. Perhaps this is the port itself. We've got a silted up basin here, an island in the middle to access the ships. If we go around, this will go onto the creek, so we can see the timbers all along here, which would have made up the sides of the dock. And here we have from a view from a different angle. Salcott's in the distance, and so is the creek. This is from a different angle. We can see the timbers of the wall as such. Okay, I'm all out of breath. So I made it back onto terra firma, and I'm going to show you where the old pub used to be. Okay, if you bear with me, so the creek runs along here. Now imagine that this would have been very open long ago, and it wouldn't have been blocked up, silted up as it is now. If we look where those two houses are, for the barges would have moored up along here. Virley's lost pub, the White Hart, sorry. I like to include a pub when making these videos, even if it's just its memory. Now Virley had a fine pub called the White Hart. It's registered from 1769, but from the picture that's available, it's perhaps 200 years later. A gentleman told me that barges and boats would moor close by where I showed you, and they would have expected to have a pub after a hard day on the water. Now, I read an interesting account of John Folkes, who competed with a chimney sweep, betting he could climb up the White Hart's chimney first, and both would end up in the creek, and I dare say a well-deserved ale or two. So, I hope you enjoyed that, and thank you very much.